Hello everybody and welcome to What's the Score, where we examine all of your Hanover College sports action. For today's show, we're going to talk about a topic in sports that can be deadly: concussions. We all know what concussions are, but how do we get them? Concussions can be anything from simply bumping your head to getting hit in the head with something. Today, athletes suffer concussions as much as any injury, but why? Is it the absence of awareness, the absence of correct coaching, the social pressures that athletes have to deal with on a daily basis? Concussions are very dangerous. They are nothing to mess around with. They affect every race, gender, age, and sport. This documentary will show what concussions are, while also educating kids so they know what they could be getting into while playing contact sports. Also, later on the show, we will have one of Hanover's athletic trainers to inform you how concussions affect athletes today. So let's dive into this issue and see why a concussion is seen as a silent killer.
That's just one thing I don't want to go through ever again. It was a very, very bad experience for me.
I only thought of concussions as that major one time you got concussed, you go to the hospital, you're throwing up, your head's a mess, you know, all those kind of ramifications. What people don't realize are the little concussions.
I think the boys think that it's not a big deal. They don't understand that having a concussion, especially if you have multiple concussions, can cause them health problems later in life.
There are anywhere between 2 and 4 million sports-related concussions every year in the United States. A majority of those are caused by contact sports, such as football and soccer. Many athletes feel that concussions aren't that big of a deal, just a minor injury with a headache. But concussions are more than that. In medical terms, concussions are injuries that cause the brain to shift in the head. Symptoms can last for a few minutes or several weeks, which is why they're so dangerous to your health. Madison High School head trainer and King's Daughters Hospital physical therapist David Pappenheim feels that all concussions should be treated with extreme caution because you never know how serious they can be.
It's trauma to the head, either from a direct blow or an indirect blow. It causes your brain to get rattled around inside your head. And it causes neurological changes and metabolic changes in your brain that make you have headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, slowed reaction time, that type of stuff.
Once an athlete suffers a concussion, he or she will know that something is wrong, even if the athlete doesn't realize that it's a concussion in the first place. Symptoms of a concussion can vary, but a few immediate symptoms include headaches and nausea. But athletes today are experiencing symptoms that could affect them for the rest of their lives. Former football player Brandon Swihart can no longer play the game he loves due to a concussion that he suffered 2 years ago.
And probably the worst of them was probably the dizziness. That's pretty much all I had back when I had the concussion. It was almost like a terrible hangover for 6 to 8 months.
Symptoms may go away after a few minutes or may linger for an extended period of time. Problems occur when players develop symptoms after suffering from multiple concussions.
They have chronic depression from multiple concussions, but most of the time they get their 2 or 3, they graduate, they're not going to see any changes in their mental status until they're in their 30s or 40s if they've had too many concussions.
Sometimes concussion symptoms feel like nothing at first, but depending on the severity, they progressively get worse as time goes on. Rugby players Jordan Martell and Spencer Hadley have each suffered from multiple concussions and are still experiencing a few of those symptoms today.
I had a really bad headache and I was kind of woozy, didn't really know where I was, and it wasn't as dramatic, but it still did have long-term impacts down the road. I've had some memory problems, ever since I got my first concussion way back my freshman year of high school. I've had memory problems all the way through then, and I recognize the fact very clearly that it's an issue. However, that's not going to stop me.
It really was just the worst experience of my entire life. Like, I was afraid to go to sleep. I thought I was just going to die in my sleep and never wake up again. And I just felt absolutely awful. Like, so many different things were wrong all at the same time.
Concussions don't affect just males. There's evidence that women actually experience worse symptoms than men, especially in sports such as basketball and volleyball. According to Concussions in Sports, Does Gender Matter?, The concussion rate in high school basketball for females was almost 3 times higher than that than males. Women's basketball is a contact sport, but head injuries are less common than other injuries like sprained ankles, shoulder injuries, and foot injuries. Basketball can get highly physical, however, which is why the risk for concussions is still there. Junior basketball player Caitlin Bischoff suffered a concussion last year that kept her out for most of the season.
I know that I had got the ball passed up to me to shoot a layup, and a girl came from my right side. I didn't see her at all, and she just shoved me to the floor, and my head and shoulder hit at the same time. And the trainers came over to me, and they said that I had made the basket, but I had no idea, like after that, really, like what had happened. And I just remember I had a lot of headaches. I had trouble focusing when I was trying to study, all those kinds of things.
Soccer players suffer many injuries throughout their career, including head injuries. One study found that almost 48% of soccer players studied suffered a concussion or suffered from concussion-like symptoms during the season. Senior soccer player Carson Reynolds suffered a concussion earlier this year, but was sent back into the game a little too soon and took another hit to the head.
But as the game went on, probably 5 or 7 minutes later, I went up for another header. This time I headed the ball cleanly. Probably shortly after that, I started losing feeling in my lips and the left side of my face, as well as my left arm. Probably from the shoulder down, I was seeing double of the ball, other players on the field. So I told Drew Roberts, who is the center back with me as well, I told him that I couldn't feel my arm and that I couldn't see the ball.
Despite having these symptoms, many athletes feel that they should continue playing after suffering from a possible concussion. They feel that if they suffer a concussion, they have to remain on the field because injuries are just part of the game. Not seeking medical attention can have devastating effects, even if the concussion is mild. So why do players stay in games after suffering from a concussion? Is it due to the social pressures? Do they not want to upset their teammates? Are serious injuries truly a part of the game? Former football player and wrestler Max Fisher of Seymour has never suffered from a diagnosed concussion, but has taken several hits to the head and kept playing.
You know, you have the adrenaline, you're in the game, you just kind of force yourself to forget about any kind of pain or headaches or anything like that. And, you know, you always get told, especially when I was playing, that concussions are something that you're gonna know. And from then on out, it was just kind of like, no, I didn't care. You know, it was like, to me, that was like, oh, that's just part of the game. I got my head hit, it hurts. What, you know, that's fine. If someone hits me on the head, I didn't think I was concussed.
I know that's how I am. I'm super competitive, so it would kill me if I had to sit there and watch my team play and there's nothing I can do to help them win or compete.
Many football players feel that their love for the game overpowers any injury that could occur. Senior quarterback Dexter Britt said he has never suffered from a diagnosed concussion, but has taken several hits to the head. His love for the game has impacted his decision to stay in the game and not notify a coach or trainer.
Well, for one, that would mean that I could possibly not get the chance to go back in the game. And it's just an unwritten rule, I guess, of football, you know. You take hits, that's part of the game. You take hits, you're gonna get hit in the head, you're gonna get hit, you get back up, you play the next play.
Football is a game where mental toughness influences athletes and can impact certain decisions. There are many social pressures while playing contact sports, especially football, including how others will view you. Players often feel that they have to stay in the game because they don't want to be seen as a coward. If you play football, you have to be a man and understand that sometimes injuries just happen.
I just never felt like what I had was significant enough to label as a concussion.
I feel like it was more important for me to be on the field and, you know, with the troops.
Concussions are most frequently seen at the high school level. At Madison High School in Madison, Indiana, athletes suffered 21 concussions during the 2011 football season alone. A few of those concussions were not reported to coaches and trainers until after the game or season. There are many reasons why players would choose to stay in a game versus leave the game after suffering a head injury. They don't want to lose a starting spot, they are afraid of how their teammates will react, and they don't think the injury is serious enough. Madison High School head football coach Patrick Morrison is a former Hanover College player. He knows firsthand why players, especially football players, continue playing with injuries.
Maybe they have that same feeling that, oh, it's just a minor headache or it's part of the game of playing football. And then you have kids that try to tough it out. And like the kid that I pointed out that we had passed out this year at halftime, I think he was one of those kids that had taken a severe hit and tried to tough it out.
Concussions are a problem in contact sports. So how as a society can we reduce the risk? There will never be a way to fully end the threat of concussions. But what we can do is create awareness and better educate athletes on the issue to increase the knowledge on the dangers of concussions. There are several ways to do that, including posters, laws, and changes in equipment. The easiest and most effective way, however, is to teach players at a young age the correct techniques so they won't suffer a concussion.
Teaching guys how to properly tackle, not to lead with their head, properly. Offensive players, they can cause concussions too by the way they try to truck someone, or linemen they bang their heads almost every play.
Awareness is important because if players learn the dangers of a concussion, they will have a better understanding of the injury and could be more likely to report the injury to a coach or trainer. Many schools have their athletes sign a form explaining what concussions are. Forms like these can be a great awareness tool, especially for parents and athletes, because they may learn something new.
Kids signed a waiver on concussions. I can't remember the exact name, but basically it's a waiver and it's a list. It talks about the symptoms you have, how to get away from concussions. Well, IHSA mandates that they have concussion information, so they all have to have information, little handouts that tell you what a concussion is, and then they have to sign it. That's a new state rule for us.
Overall, the awareness level has increased greatly, but more still needs to be done. Parents feel that the issue is being handled effectively, but that job involves the coaches. Lori Hedges, a mother of multiple athletes, feels that it's the coach's duty to educate their players on concussions.
They have to look out for their players, but if you don't win, you don't tend to remain a coach very long. And unfortunately, that's true. And so they have to balance having a winning season with taking care of their players. So I think if they don't think it's a big deal, they might not say anything.
Concussions will always be a problem in contact sports, no matter how much we try to eliminate the issue. What we can do is educate, because education is more than just explaining what concussions are and how to treat them. Education can give parents and coaches the information to help diagnose a possible concussion, especially in a time where athletes are bigger, stronger, and faster than ever before. Education can also give athletes the knowledge to help make better decisions, like deciding to leave the game after taking a hit to the head. Education can also save a life.
You just pray for player safety every time they step on the field, and pray for your own safety, and try to have fun with it.
As you can see, concussions are nothing to mess around with. I'm joined here today with Mark Eilers, one of Hanover College's athletic trainers, to give us his take on concussions and how serious they can be for a collegiate athlete. Mark, thanks for being on the show.
No problem, bud.
First question I have for you. Now, for a kid who suffers a concussion or takes a hit to the head, what would you say are the main signs and symptoms that parents and trainers should look for?
Well, a lot of people, they think of concussions as having a headache.
Yeah.
That's not always the case. A lot of times you just look at their appearance. A lot of times there'll be sluggishness, their awareness on, their presence on the field or whatever. A lot of times they'll change their personality, and you'll just be able to tell their head will be spinning, and a lot of times they'll understand that they'll have a concussion usually. A lot of times it wears away in a couple minutes. Some people, they end up playing through concussions because they may not really understand that they have a concussion. Others, they struggle through it, and their head spinning. Sometimes it can cause vomiting and stuff like that. So there's a lot of symptoms to really look for. The biggest thing is awareness, educating so that they understand the symptoms.
Well, based on that, on your opinion, how dangerous is a concussion?
Oh, concussions are the top of the line discussion in our profession. It's one of the most severe injuries that we think athletes can have, and it's really a scary thing. Concussions, especially with all the lawsuits going on, and it's one of the most feared things. So, rightfully so, it's a very conservative treatment for concussions.
Now, let's say a kid decides that he wants to play contact sports for the first time. What should the parents know before letting their child play a contact sport such as football?
Well, it all depends on the age. The younger you go, the harder it is, because those younger individuals don't understand the symptoms, versus as you get into the high school and into the collegiate settings, it's important to educate, especially as us as athletic trainers, to educate athletes on these issues. Like I said, the younger the individuals, it's important for officials and teammates or coaches to just kind of supervise and make sure that if you see an athlete not look right, or maybe take a big hit, just to be a little conservative. The high school and collegiate level, usually there's athletic trainer present, and the symptoms should be before the season starts, and there should be paperwork that needs to be signed letting the athlete know that, hey, we went over the symptoms. Parents and coaches should all be informed of all these.
Okay. Who would you say is at a greater risk for suffering a concussion?
Contact sports, football, one of the biggest. Obviously, with athletes getting much bigger, stronger, and faster these days, it's hard to prevent concussions from happening. Any kind of contact sports, they can happen to anything, whether you're a diver, but the most commonly, usually the contact sports like football, maybe rugby, basketball every once in a while, but mainly football. Females are actually more likely to get concussions based on research. There really is no known reason why, but a lot of times we'll see here at Hanover College football, all men's sport. Obviously, you're going to see a heavy load of concussions, but that's not to say that they don't happen. We've seen tons of concussions in soccer, in basketball, softball, but usually the risk is a lot lower. That doesn't mean that the numbers are going to be higher in football versus all women's sports added up together. It's just the risk is just much more greater in football.
Now, let's say an athlete here at Hanover takes a hit to the head, suffers a concussion. What do you and the rest of your training staff do to get that player back out onto the field?
What we usually do is first we aware our players pre-season, all right, what a concussion looks like. We expect them to sign these papers, and it pretty much comes out to, a lot of times, which is great, is the teammates and coaches are the ones that kind of point out. Sometimes the athlete doesn't necessarily know that they have a concussion. They're like, oh, I got a slight headache. They don't really recall getting hit. But, it's important for your teammates to call them out. And when they do, they come to us. We have them go through the symptoms, and the most important thing is to rest. To rest your brain, not watching any TV or any video games. That's what we instruct them to do. And then following that, what we'll have them do pre-game, actually we have an impact testing, which is a concussion software program that we use pre-season to get a baseline figure. It scores 5 different things, and it's a very good and accurate testing for concussions. So once they're symptom-free following the initial concussion, what we'll have them do is take that concussion test, the impact test, and if their baseline scores are back to normal, then we'll clear them to do a progression, all right, not to return to play. Our progression, we have a 7-day protocol. So after you're symptom-free, pass the impact test, you begin a 7-day protocol, which consists of light running, and then each day you increase it slightly. So the 6th day, what they would do is a non-contact practice, and if they do that fine, they would go to a full contact practice, and then they would be cleared to play, assuming none of the symptoms have returned.
Okay.
And all this is based on the physician. All concussions have to be cleared by a physician. An athletic trainer cannot return an athlete to play without a physician's approval.
Okay. And, Mark, finally, one last question. How many concussions can a player suffer before you or another person on your staff steps in and says, I don't think you should be playing sports anymore?
Usually, as athletic trainers, we don't have the call for that. Whenever that situation arises, usually if you have more than 2 concussions, 2 to 3 concussions, we highlight you, and we have you meet with our team physician. And our team physician kind of discusses that with you, with the athlete. And what generally at Hanover College, our team physician, usually anything over 3. Usually we suggest moving away from contact sports and maybe doing a non-contact sport. So if you're a football player, maybe you have suffered 2 to 3 concussions over a year span, yeah, you're highlighted, and they're going to recommend that you play a low-impact sport like tennis or maybe golfing or something like that. That's the main thing that we focus on here, and it's getting pretty consistent across the nation.
So it's a pretty serious issue then.
Yes, it is. It's a very serious issue, and awareness is increasing on a daily basis, and it's rightfully so with all the litigation going on, and just the nature of the sports are just with the bigger athletes, faster, stronger athletes. It's just such a huge risk, and with all these NFL players, everyone's seeing, with all the research on brains and all the diseases and the future on concussions needs more research, and it's just a scary topic with all these people having all these problems in their futures.
Hopefully this has changed your point of view on concussions and will make you more aware of the seriousness of the issue. Remember, if you or someone you know suffers a concussion, has concussion-like symptoms, or takes any hit to the head, take them out and report them to a medical professional immediately. Sports can be fun, but also dangerous. All right, guys, that's all we have for you today. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, one final thought. When in doubt, sit them out. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.